Hello, my name is Chung, and thank you for checking out Plasmic. Any feedback you have for us would be super helpful as we try to bridge the divide between design and engineering. Today I'm going to show you how to use Plasmic to build a button component. Here I'm starting out with just a blank project. I'm going to first create a new artboard, and an artboard is just a place where you can draw out your design. I'm going to draw the rectangle for my button by hitting the S key. So that puts me into stack drawing mode. A stack is just a container that automatically lays out its content either vertically or horizontally. So in this drawing mode, if I draw a Y rectangle, it's going to lay it out horizontally. If I draw a tall rectangle, it's going to lay it out vertically. But you can always change the stack direction later if you want. I'm just going to start out with a Y rectangle. I'm going to hit T for text and button. So here we go. It's not a very pretty button. One problem is that right now it's huge. The container that I have selected here is just this very explicit size that I happen to draw it with. Instead, I really wanted to kind of wrap around the content of the button. And there's a few ways for me to do that. One is to just double click on the edge here, and that would wrap the width of the button around the content. And you can see here that the width is now set to wrap. The other is to hit this fit content button for the height to also wrap the height around the content. My favorite way to do this is actually to just, let me back out these two changes here. My favorite way to do this is to just hit the A key, which just auto sizes both the width and the height at the same time. So let me just apply some quick styling here, some padding, make it a boring gray, maybe some border radius, and a little shadow. Okay, nothing fancy, but good enough for our purpose today. So you have a button, and you're probably going to be using this button again and again in your design. So when that happens, it's good to create a component out of your button. A component is a reusable piece of design that you can use again and again, but it centralizes the styling, the look and feel of that design in one place. So let me show you how it works. With this button, I can just right click and say extract component. Or I can hit this extract component button up here. Call this a button. And now this is a button instance. I can make a few of these. So here are 3 button instances. And these buttons all look the same. So component instances all look the same as what we call the master component, which is kind of what defines how a component instance looks. I can edit the master component anytime I want by double clicking on a component instance. So here I'm going to double click on this, and that puts me into what I call the spotlight mode. This is where you can edit the master component. In Plasmic, the master component doesn't live someplace somewhere that you have to go and find and edit. Instead, the master component is always kind of accessible to you through any component instance. So you can just double click on any instance, and then you can edit the master component on the spot within the context of where you're using that component. So this makes this mode really powerful and really useful for making quick tweaks to how your component works as you're using that component. So for example, I can make the background color green, and you can see that all these other 2 instances also turn green. So this is how you can centralize the styling of your button on the master component. I'm gonna switch this back to gray for now. So that's one way to edit the component master, but and it's useful for making quick tweaks to the master component. But if I'm working with the master component a lot, like I'm building up the master component, I'm making a lot of edits and changes to it, I usually like to do it from within its own artboard. And to do that, I can right-click on the component instance and say Edit Master Component in New Artboard. And this just creates a new artboard. Here it's just laid out right next to the artboard from before. And this artboard is different because it's the master component artboard. This is an artboard just for editing the master button component. So you can see that it's different because it has a different icon here compared to the other artboard here. And so changes I make to this component, to things over here, will be changes I make to the master. So for example, I can change the text here to click me, and all these instances change to click me. So that's a button, but you're gonna have a lot of different types of button that you use in your design. You might have a primary button for your primary call to action. You might have a danger button for destructive actions. Buttons with icons, bigger buttons, smaller buttons, etc. So Plasmic allows you to model all of that explicitly for the button component through a concept we call variants. So let me show you how that works. So I'm gonna click on the button here, and I see that there's a button component panel here. And this just holds all the information about that button component. I can hit more here, which shows me all the variants I have for the button component. A variant is a variation on the component. So you might have a primary button or a secondary button or a small button. These are all kind of variations on that same button component. The component works the same, it just looks a little different. The base variant, which is what's currently selected here, that's the default way that your component looks. So most of your designs, most of your changes probably goes into the base variant, and then you might have other variants that override styles in the base variant. So for example, I might have a base variant that looks like this, and then I might have a primary variant that makes the background color a different color. So let me actually try to do that. Let's make a primary variant. I'm going to hit new group, and this is just a grouping of variants. I'm going to call this type, and I'm going to call my first variant the primary variant. And you'll see that I have primary variant selected here, and up here it says that I'm recording changes for the primary variant. That means all the edits that I make now, both on Canvas and on the styling panel down here, will be saved just for the primary variant and not the base variant anymore. So you will only see those changes if the primary variant is activated for primary buttons. So for primary buttons, I would like the background color to be, I guess blue is the fashionable color for primary. I'll make the text also white, and there you go. I'm also going to make a variant for danger buttons, where I will make the background color red, and the font is going to be also white, and maybe I'll just bold that, why not? Okay, so these are our two variants. I have base button, I have the primary button, and I have the danger button. Let's also make a variant for small and large buttons. So let's say when I have a small button, I want my font size to be smaller, and then maybe I want my padding to be tighter, like I don't know, 3 and 5 instead. So you can see that over here, when I'm targeting the small variant, I can see that this dot is blue, and it shows me what that, when I put 3 and 5 here, I'm setting a padding specifically for the small variant, and it's overriding values from the base variant. And then let me just quickly make also a large variant with a larger font, 16. Okay, so here are my buttons. I have my base button, my primary, danger, small, and large buttons. All right. Now I've created these variants, I can use them in my design. So for example, over here, I'm using a button instance here, and I can change this into a primary button. Over here, I'm going to change this into a danger button, and then maybe a small button as well. So note that we never explicitly designed what a small danger button looks like. Instead, I can just mix and match what variants I'm activating, and it's going to all just kind of merge together into my button instance here. So this is one way for me to kind of customize how my buttons look by changing the variants, by activating different variants that I designed for the button component. When I'm working with the master, I can also see what a dangerous small button looks like. So, when I click on danger, I'm looking at danger. When I click on small, I'm looking at small. How do I see what a danger small button looks like? Well, when I click on a variant, I am recording for that specific variant. So that means that all your changes that I'm making go for that variant. So that's why when you click, you can only select one variant at a time, because all your edits are going whenever that variant is activated. But sometimes you want to make your edits in the context of other variants being activated. So for example, I might want to be making changes to the danger variant, but I want to see what it looks like when the small variant is also activated. So I can still look at what it looks like with the small variant activated by clicking on this eye icon here. So this basically turns on the small variant, but you're still targeting the danger variant. So as you're working, you're still making changes to the danger variant and not the small variant. So you can turn these on as you want to check, kind of what your design looks like when other variants are activated. All right, let me turn that off. Cool. So back over here, I can enter live mode, which kind of just shows me what it looks like when it's rendered. And they render as I would expect, but I kind of want, say, the background color to look different when I hover over the button, right? And also when I click on it, for example. So let's do that. To make that happen, we need to create what we call interaction variants. So these are still variants, which means there's still a variation of how the button component looks like, but they're interaction variants in that they're triggered automatically by interactions like hovering over it or clicking on it. So let's try to do that. For the button variant, for the button component, I'm going to create a hover interaction variant here. So I can say when I'm hovering, I want my background color to look, I guess background color goes lighter when you hover over it. Can never tell which way is which. Okay, and then when I am pressing on it, I want my background color to look darker. All right, cool. So back here, if I turn on live mode again, I can see that when I hover over it, it's lighter, and then when I press on it, it's darker. Right? So works as expected, pretty good. How about over here? That doesn't work so well. So my primary button is using the same hover color as my base button. I probably want a different hover color for the primary button. So let's go make that. Back to the master component, I'm going to create a interaction variant for the primary variant. So what happens when I am primary and I'm hovering over it? Well, I will want my color to look maybe a light blue, and then when I'm pressing over it, I will want this to look like a dark blue. All right, let's try that out. Boom, boom. There we go. That works. Boom, boom. Yes, and we need to do the same for danger variant, but we won't do that for now. So great, I have 3 different kinds of buttons. They interact as I want. I can hover over them, I can click on them. But they all say click me, which is not very useful. I don't want all my buttons to say click me. I want them to say different things. And so in Plasmic, we don't allow you to kind of arbitrarily override the content of a component. We think customizations on a component should be deliberate and thoughtful and thought through. And we don't want people to just arbitrarily change up a component however they want, because then you don't really have a consistent system of components that you're using. So the way to allow people to customize how the content of a component is by creating what we call a slot. So a slot is kind of a hole in a component where where people can plop in whatever arbitrary content that they want. So in this case, for a button, we care about designing what the button looks like, but we don't care about what the text looks like. We want people to just kind of be able to arbitrarily put whatever text they want into that button. So the way we do this is we select the text node here, we do right click, and we say convert to a slot. And now you can see that we've created a slot called children with the default content of click me. And now I can go, and all my button instances now have this prop called children that I can now edit. So I can click on this prop, and I can change it to submit, maybe change this into TV, and so on. So now I have buttons that I can customize the content for. This is getting pretty close to what I want from a button. But I have even more kinds of buttons that I might want to use in my product, right? For example, some of the buttons might have an icon in front of the button. So let's also make that happen. Let's see. Let's go find an icon first. I'm just going to pick one somewhere. Let's say, I don't know what looks good. Let's do a check. So this is just a quick way for me to import some SVG into Plasmic. Copy this in, put this to the left, and there you go. Now you can see a check mark on all my button instances. I probably want to put some space between these two, and the easiest way for me to do that is to add a column gap to the root container here, which is a horizontal stack. So a column gap basically just spaces out the content of a horizontal stack by some pixels. So I'm gonna say maybe 3 pixels. Sure. Okay. There you go. So now all my button instances have this check mark. I probably don't want all of them to have a check mark, like the content of the button. I also want to be able to customize what that icon is. So again, like before, I'm going to just convert this image into a slot. And this time I'm going to call this slot the prefix icon. So now I can go ahead and change the prefix icon to whatever I want. So let's say I make a copy of this component. I'm going to change the icon to a puzzle piece. Copy this. I'm gonna remove the current icon and then just paste in the new icon. There we go. So this is how you can customize the image by putting different images into the prefix icon slot. Some buttons don't have any icons though. So what I want is a variant of the button component that has an icon and a variant that doesn't have an icon. So that some buttons have icons, some buttons don't have icons. I can structure this however I want. I could have the base base button variant to always have an icon, so buttons have icons by default, or I can make having icon a special variant, which I think is more natural, and that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to create a new variant group called with icons, and I'm going to create a variant called with prefix icon. And so what I want is in the base variant, I'm going to collapse this artboard for now. In the base variant, I want to hide the prefix icon slot because I don't want there to be an icon by default. But in the with prefix icon variant, I am going to show the prefix icon slot. So now I can go to this button instance and I can turn on the with prefix icon slot variant, and I have an icon there. I can turn this on here. So the buttons that have that variant set will have an icon slot for you to drop things in, and buttons that don't will not show that. Of course, sometimes I want buttons to come after the text, so that's also create a suffix icon variant. I'll pick yet another one. Okay, so I have a new image. I'm going to turn this into a slot like before. I'm going to call this slot the postfix or the suffix, I guess. Oops, suffix icon. And then again, I'm going to make this slot invisible in the base variant, and I'm going to create a new variant called with suffix icon, and I'm going to turn that visible. Okay, so now in the base variant I look like this, with prefix icon I look like this, with suffix icon I look like this. Okay, so I can take this button and then I can turn on with suffix icon instead of with prefix icon, and it'll look like that. But what if I want a button that has both a prefix and a suffix icon? That happens sometimes, I guess. Well, you'll notice that here I can only switch between with prefix or with suffix. I can only pick one or the other, or none of them. I can't do both. But you could by doing this. So by default, for a variant group, you can only select one variant at a time. That works pretty well for things like small and large or the type. A lot of variant groups are kind of mutually exclusive things you can select. But here, for the with icons variant group, it makes sense for me to turn on both with prefix and with suffix. So I'm going to make that possible by right-clicking on this or using this menu thing here and say change type to a multi-choice group. And that just means that I can select any number of activate any number of variants I want here. So over here, with icons, now I can select with prefix and with suffix. And this button will now have both prefix and suffix icons. So there you go. I can check this out again in preview mode and see that everything works as expected. So yeah, that's my super brief tour of building a button in Plasmic. In another video, I will demonstrate how to then create a code component out of the button designs that I've made. So anyway, thank you so much for trying out Plasmic, and please leave us any feedback that you have about how things work. Good luck. Have fun.